After watching this video, you'll be able to describe how disruption facing companies today amplifies the need for DevOps. Since the year 2000, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies are gone. 52%. That's over half of the Fortune 500 companies that existed in the year 2000 are now gone. What were they up against? In a word, disruption. It's not if you get disrupted, it's when you get disrupted. Established institutions like banks might think, who's going to disrupt me? You can talk to banks about the need to deploy fast and use continuous delivery, but they're not always responsive. Then the bank down the street comes out with an app that can take a picture of a check and deposit it. Meanwhile, if it takes your bank 6 months to get your app updated to take a picture of the check to deposit it, your bank's going to lose a lot of customers in those 6 months. It's not a matter of if you get disrupted, it's a matter of when. If you talk to customers about being disrupted, a lot of them will say, oh, the technology disrupted me. I've been disrupted by technology. But if you think about it, the technology that was available to the disruptors is the same technology that's available to the incumbents, because most of it is open source. The disruptors just had a different business model. The example lots of people like to give is Uber. Uber's the big disruptor. So let's think about what was the amazing technology that allowed Uber to disrupt the taxi industry. Well, they had GPS, but GPS has been around for a while. We've had Garmins and TomToms on our dashboard for years, so that's nothing new. That's fairly old technology. Then there's electronic payments. Electronic payments are older than GPS. They've been around for decades. And then there's a smartphone in every pocket. This is pretty commonplace as well, but Uber put the three of those things together with a new business model. Instead of waiting for a taxi to drive by or hailing a cab or making a phone call to a dispatcher, what if we allowed people to summon a driver from their smartphone? Let the driver know where they are, and then the nearest driver comes and gets them. And they can track where they are and when they'll be picked up. Uber had a different business model, and people loved it. It wasn't so much the technology, it was the new business model that allowed them to disrupt. In fact, here in New York State where I live, the taxi industry is lobbying Albany, the state capital, for legislation to limit Uber. The taxi industry doesn't need government legislation. They need to hire some programmers and get an app. Genie's out of the bottle. This is the way people want to do ride sharing. You either adapt or you go extinct. Disruption is everywhere, in every industry. When was the last time you used a travel agent? You do that on the web now. What about those little point-and-shoot cameras? That was a major industry, and everyone was buying them. Now, not so much, because everyone has a pretty good camera in their pocket on their smartphone. People used to say to me, what's the best camera to use for candid shots? And I'd say, the camera that you have with you, the one in your pocket. That's the one the best camera to use, right? So people don't generally need to have these point-and-shoot cameras anymore. They got disrupted by the smartphone. Think about Blockbuster video. Back in the 80s, we would rent videotapes. VCRs were a big thing. And we'd physically go to the Blockbuster store, and if we brought the tape back late, they would penalize us. It was like checking a library book late, and we accepted it. Then Netflix came around, and Netflix realized DVDs had just come out. And the DVDs were a lot smaller than those big, bulky tapes, and they could mail them out. So the first business model for Netflix was that they would mail you a DVD, and then you'd have a list of DVDs that you wanted. And you wouldn't get the next DVD until you mailed the one you had back. If you kept it for 6 months, that didn't change. They didn't give you a late fee. They didn't care if you kept it for 6 months. You just didn't get another one for 6 months. You had to send one back before you can get another one. Then, after a while, Netflix realized that they didn't need DVDs. Everyone had broadband internet in their homes. So Netflix began streaming movies into the customers' homes. See, the problem for Blockbuster is that they thought they were in the video rental business. But Netflix understood they were in the entertainment business. They were in a totally different business. They were entertaining people now. And now they have their own shows on Netflix, right? Produced shows by Netflix. And Blockbuster went out of business. If you look at Garmin, they didn't do so badly. Garmin was able to pivot. When everybody had a GPS on their phone, they didn't need a Garmin on their dashboard anymore. But Garmin understood they were not in the mapping business. They realized they were in the tracking business. They started making little wrist trackers, right? Garmin made these trackers you could use to exercise and stuff. They pivoted, and they're still around. Some businesses survive, and some businesses do not. But the message here is that technology is the enabler of innovation. It is not the driver of innovation. You must have a great business model idea and a great model, and then leverage the technology. Technology alone is not going to drive innovation. It just enables it. In this video, you learned that technology is the enabler of innovation and the importance of having an innovative business model.